we're so far away from everyone. So great.
Okay, if we might.
Yeah, that's fine. Great.
Yeah, so. Go ahead.
Okay, I don't know exactly how to do this. I've never done this all en masse. So I guess people ask questions, and then 20 minutes later we're done. We can all start drinking. Not really. I had chamomile tea last night, so Will was making fun of me. Yeah. So just if you have a question, maybe stand so we don't all.
Somebody want to go first? Anybody? There we go. Gentleman there.
Yay!
I
Hi.
have no problem. Hi, Felicia. Jeff McAleer with thegaminggang.com. Question for you. Everybody loves Geek and Sundry. How did that idea come about?
Geek and Sundry was a slate of web series that Geek and Sundry started because YouTube went to a bunch of the top agencies and producers in Hollywood or LA, and they were looking for people to pitch web series slates to them. So
Exclusive content?
Huh?
Exclusive content?
Yeah, so what they were looking to do is invest money into web series to try to create a new kind of entertainment on their platform. So I looked at that opportunity, and despite having a lot of interesting opportunities in more mainstream Hollywood stuff, I decided that it was more interesting to me to try to do this network, build a network from scratch. So my producer Kim, Evie, and I, there's a lot of sirens. It's not that bad an answer. So my producer Kim, Evie, and I sat down and we just put together a PowerPoint presentation that we went in with, and we don't really do that kind of thing. It's not something I was experienced with, but we just sat down and asked, well, what would we want to watch? What do we think our fans would want to watch? And what is what are the shows that we're not, we don't see out there?
So like Colin Ferguson crocheting?
Yes, exactly. Colin Ferguson crocheting specifically needed to be done.
Yes.
The world needed to see that.
Right.
No, and I also thought of my favorite people who had ideas that were great, and we just didn't have the funds or the means to make the shows. So we went in with a slate of like 10 series, and YouTube looked at our series, and they also took like, 4,000 submissions, and out of that they picked 100 channels to create, and mine was one of them. So it was very exciting to go in, and they picked 6 of our shows. That's what we were able to make with what they invested in us, and that's it. As for the name of it, I was actually on my way to my birthday weekend to San Francisco, and I was brainstorming in the car on a sticky note. So I kept thinking, like, what are ideas with the word geek in them that didn't sound cliched, they didn't sound pandery. I wanted this to be a different kind of network because I am a geek, but I feel like sometimes people just put that label on things to sell it, or it's sort of condescending or uninclusive in a way, or stereotypical. So that's why I thought Geek and Sundry sort of reinvented that idea, like taking old and making it new. So it's a little bit of an old-fashioned idea, but sundry means whatever. So we're not just confined to the cliche of what people think is a geek. We can throw anything in there, and it's under our umbrella, and that's kind of my philosophy anyway.
Fantastic.
Thank you. Next question?
Felicia, Elliot Miller from the Gaming Gang. My question is about Rock Jocks. When is Rock Jocks coming out? Tell everybody a little more about Rock Jocks.
It's so funny. Yeah, thank you for asking. I actually did my last thing for Rock Jocks the other day. They were doing a recording session for something. That's just going to be sort of a fun extra. I know that the movie is being finished. One of the funny things is that my producer, Sherry Bryant, where I met her and worked with her first on Rock Jocks. So she actually is now one of the producers for Geek and Sundry, along with my producer, Kim Evie, who has done the Guild with me for 5 years, and she did Dragon Age as well. So that's kind of a funny sort of coincidence. Meeting her, she was really the element that helped us put this whole company together. Because it's not just web series we're making, it's a whole company that we're starting from the ground up. I'm not sure about a release date for Rock Jocks, but I know that they're finishing the final special effects shots now. And I've seen some footage doing ADR, and it looks really good. So I think it's like a fun kind of throwback, sort of a raunchy comedy, but it's set in sort of a geek world. And I'm really excited about people seeing it.
Yes, yes.
Next question? Hi. Oh, sorry.
Blue Caldwell from the Universal Geek Podcast. We have talked a lot about how happy we are that women are much more of a presence in the geek world these days. And I was just curious if I felt like I didn't have any really positive female role models growing up, and you're younger than I am, so I was wondering, did you have any? Or do you feel like that's a new thing?
That's interesting. I don't know. I was raised in a very interesting environment. I was homeschooled, and sort of the people I looked up to were like my teachers more, and my parents. I just basically found what I liked and just did it. So I didn't really encounter a lot of rejection from other kids for the things that I liked. I was just, when I told my mom I wanted to read all the Perry Mason novels ever, she just bought them for me, right? And when we were addicted to playing video games, she just got them for us, you know. So it was kind of funny. I just didn't grow up in a way where I felt self-conscious about liking the things that I liked. And I guess that's the kind of thing that I do now, really. That's where I found myself. I went to Hollywood, and then I sort of forgot that about myself, and I became kind of unhappy trying to kind of fit into what other people saw in me or wanted to package me as, and I got very unhappy. So then when I just came back around to the idea that, well, I'm just going to like what I like and not apologize about it, that's, you know, where I am today in a sense, and it's kind of ironic that it comes back to the things like that I love that wouldn't be accepted as mainstream. So I'm really proud to represent that voice. And I've met a lot of girls and women here at this convention who say that. And, you know, I don't particularly champion a lot of like quote unquote girl gamer things or like, and I don't have I don't have any negative thoughts about that. I think people should find support where they have it. But to me, I'd rather just represent who I am and not particularly draw anything different about me. I'm just who I am, and I do what I do, and I enjoy it. And then I think through just being yourself, you can change people's perception of things versus like calling it out. Look at me, I'm different, but I'm still this. So that's just my philosophy about it. And if we can all enjoy it together and not sit down at a table and have somebody like give you extra instruction as a girl or like try to slip you a special, you know, free item or something, like if we'd all just be like, okay, we all know how to play the game, I think it's a little bit more healthy for all of us. So, and that's what I see here, you know, everybody just proudly just loving what they love without calling you know, attention to it.
Eric Steiger, Game Trade Magazine. What are you playing lately? Anything on tabletop that you're really excited about seeing showing up in the future, board game wise, that you wanted to plug?
Yeah, so I mean, to be honest with you, Tabletop was one of the shows that I thought of that kind of morphed a little. When I was putting together the slate for Geek and Sundry, you know, we were putting down shows that we definitely wanted to do to pitch, and I knew that I wanted to work with Will Wheaton, and I called him up and I said, well, do you want to do a show for us? And he's like, I don't know, what kind of show? I don't want to do just a plain vlogging show, that's the worst. And I was like, well, I'm doing one, but I'm going to have fun with it. But I totally respect that, because you got to do what you love. And I pitched him the idea of doing a show about just being a dungeon master. So he would do like either D&D or just straight role-playing games where he was always DMing. And he was like, yeah, I don't know about that idea. I would rather do something about board games every episode. And I was like, oh, that's a better idea, actually, because every single episode, you know, if a viewer doesn't like one game or doesn't respond to it or gets confused by it, they'll have another game that next week to sort of learn about. And he got so passionate on the phone, you know, when we started like brainstorming about the show, I knew that it was like going to be a fit, because I think especially on the web, you have to have a passion for what you're making versus like, I've been hired to do this and I don't, you know, it's not my passion, but they have to have somebody represent this show. So that's why I'm really, really especially proud of it, because, you know, seeing the feedback on the show, it seems like not only are, you know, board game people feel like they're having a show that can represent them in a way, but there are plenty of people who don't play board games who are attracted to them. And I personally am not much of a board game player, or I wasn't. I play D&D. I've had many campaigns over the last 5 years. I played, like, one of them was like 2 years long, so I do know how to play role-playing games. But to me, I never really played, board games. But the cool thing is that through Tabletop, I was there on set the whole time producing, and I got to play. We did the day before we started shooting, we would do a playthrough for the camera crew to see how all the shows or all the games were played. And I got to play all of them. So we sat there for like 10 hours and played through all 10 games. And I learned to not only, love many of the games individually, but many of them, just the idea of playing. And a lot of our camera people were like, hey, do you have an extra copy of this game? And these are people who had no geek background, no nothing, and they would take home games. They were like, well, I want that one. Oh, I want this one. The ones that I particularly responded to were, my two favorite were the co-op games. I loved Castle Panic, which I think is our next episode, and then also Pandemic. Those are my two favorite, and I noticed, of course, they're the co-op games, but in retrospect, I didn't realize that when I first saw it. I love co-op gaming in general, video gaming, so it's funny that I said that. And also, I played Elder Signs, which I'm actually in one of the games later this year for Elder Signs, and Alhambra. Those are the ones that I took home. But, after we played through all of them, I was like, can I get a copy of all of them? I do produce the show. There's, me walking around now, like, not only do I see the games, identify the games that I know, oh, I know that game, but now I'm looking at the games in a kind of different kind of way. Hey, this looks fun personally, but would this be good for the show? Like, is it one of those games that you can learn over the episode, or do you have to know a lot up front and all that stuff? So, yeah, it's really fun to walk the floor and see all these games in a different light.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Tony Topper from the Secret Cabal Gaming Podcast. What kind of process do you use to decide what type of games you're going to put on the show?
So Will is pretty much in charge of a lot of it. We also have Boyan, who is our games consultant and helps us, games producer. So he was on set the whole time with the director, making sure that the rules were being followed and everything was cinematic. And then the director, in the weeks leading up to the shoot, the director and the producers and Will and Boyan, and occasionally me if I was available, would play through the games. And we would discuss, like, is this a game that's visually interesting? Do we think that this is going to read? Are the players interacting with each other enough? So I guess the criteria, in retrospect, I think the games that work best are you don't have to have a big info dump up front of the game. You don't have to be like, okay, here's a 20-minute explanation about how to do the first episode, the first round. And then two, there's interesting visual elements. And three, will the players interact with each other other than just staring at their cards the whole time? It's definitely is a component as a viewer. Are you enjoying the play between the players, or is everybody just into their book? That actually eliminated a couple games that I won't say specifically what they are, but it eliminated a couple really good games just because we were concerned about that sort of interactivity. There are games that we did that turned out really well that broke that mold. Like we did Fiasco. Fiasco doesn't have any elements that you see. And we did a Dragon Age RPG with no minis and things like that. So there are certainly games that break that rule, but those are the general ones that, to me, I feel like, to keep in our mind when we're picking games.
Hi, Bob Richardson for RPGFan.com. For Tabletop, what kinds of high-profile guests could we expect to see in future episodes? For instance, Joss Whedon or Patrick Stewart.
Oh, well, those are good selections. If you could hook me up with that, that would be nice. There are a lot of a lot of really high-profile people who just the timing was bad. So if we get picked up, cross fingers. I have a very big roster of people, not only who said they would do it but couldn't schedule it out, but people who have actually reached out to me and Will and said, hey, I really want to be on your show. And we're like, what? So that's the cool thing about the show is that there are a lot of not closet board gamers, just people who you wouldn't expect to be board game fans who are like reaching out to us to be on the show. But we have some really great guests. We have Amber Benson, who was on Buffy, as a guest, and then we also have, just trying to think, we have Garfunkel and Oates are going to be. They're a really funny internet music duo. We have Bill Prady, the showrunner of Big Bang Theory. We also have Bess Riesgraf from Leverage. And I know that we have just a crazy roster of guests. That the cool thing is a lot of them came in not knowing board games, and then a couple of them came in over-prepared and loving board games. And it's really interesting because some people were huge board game addicts, but they would get placed in a game that wasn't their thing, and they're every single time you cut to them, they're like, well, I'm a tactical player, so this whole visual thing, they get so defensive because they consider themselves a really good board game player, but it just happened to be that they got assigned to a game they weren't particularly good at. So we have some really fun people coming up.
Matt Val with a diehard game fan. You've kind of made a niche for yourself in the new media. If you were to start out in the entertainment business today, would you go the traditional route first, or would you go straight into producing your own through new media?
It just depends on what your end goal is.
Okay.
I think starting right now, it's a much more crowded field than when I started 5 years ago. The internet was very small back then, and when you send out a tweet, more than 5 people would see it. I think we're in a kind of a transition point where everybody's aware of social media, but the tools are not there yet to really control how you get your information. I don't think people perceive that as much as they do. You really have to be very smart about how you let people know about, I have people now who are like, what's Geek and Sundry? I'm like, did you not see the 500 tweets that I've done in the last month about Geek and Sundry? But that's the thing. We have, the more people you follow, the more people who are involved in social media. I don't think social media has a scaling problem now, which is kind of interesting. And the frustrating thing is that the only people who are getting that solved, it seems are big companies who are buying ad placement. And that's the message that's really kind of piercing through, because the companies need to make money, obviously. But hopefully, they'll see that, hey, my user needs more tools to be able to make sure that they keep up with this person. And you can't unfollow that person you worked with 2 years ago on Twitter because they'll get their feelings hurt. It's interesting because social media is not only a technical numbers thing, but it's an emotional thing. And giving people the tools to be able to, get the message across is kind of the constant struggle now when you have your whole thing based on that. So, if I were starting out today, I would take the advice of people who gave me the advice, but I didn't listen to when I first started, which was, I came to acting as a violinist, and somebody told me, well, don't give everything up, just be the violinist and do something with your violin, and that'll make you different from everybody. I was like, no, I'm going to be an actor. And in retrospect, I'm like, yeah, if I had started a band or really stuck with my violin, that would have been a skill that really made me stand apart. And I think a lot of people just, might make that mistake. So you really have to own your individuality in a way to stand out. And I guess that would be, whatever platform you're on, you just have to be who what's special about you, in a way, and just persevere and be that. And then you'll finally, one day, that uniqueness will be an advantage versus becoming homogenized, which might be the quick fix, but is not the long-term thing.
Okay. Elliot from the Gaming Gang again. Sorry. I missed the last episode of Eureka. Are you still dead?
Well, spoiler alert!
Yeah, are we not talking about this already?
Fist fight! Fist fight in the press room. Not to spoil anybody, but I would just say that the last season of Eureka is very unique, and there's a lot of amazing things to happen yet on the show. And I would, if you like my character, you will be seeing more of her.
If you T-vote it.
He's gonna punch you later.
We're best friends.
You're best friends? Oh my gosh. He's a spoiler? He's just a constant spoiler.
Is he what I'm talking about?
Okay, Kathleen Sharp with GameGumShoes.com. That's kind of an odd question. It's almost off subject. Just to kind of get a gauge of the kind of impact that you've had working in social media and in the new media. What is the most common question people ask you? One that really just sticks with you, like, God, will people quit asking me this? Just to have an idea what kind of thing. Yeah.
I don't really have a question that irritates me. I don't. I mean, the question that like, oh, what was it like working with X? You know, I don't know how to answer that. That question always had the same response, and everybody's gonna always give it the same response. Nobody's gonna be like, I hate that guy. They're always gonna be like, I love it, you know. Or like if you're privileged like me, I've had the privilege of like being pretty selective in what I do, and I always work with like the best people. I mean, I can only sing so much glowing praise about people, but then at the same time, it's like, you know, it's a privilege to say that I've worked with so many awesome people and enjoyed my process so much. I wish I could say something more interesting than that. But you know, I guess as far as social media goes, like I'm irritated by all the catchwords, like how do I market myself better and all this stuff, and I feel like you have to provide value other than just wanting to take from people. So you just can't want from people all the time. If you're that guy who's like, hey buddy, haven't talked to you in 2 years. Oh, I heard you got a pass to E3. You know, or hey, I have a Twitter, you know, I'm doing a Kickstarter, please. And I'm like, I haven't heard from you in 5 years. We had an acting class together, you know, 6 years ago. I don't know, you know, it would be nice to hear from you other than that. So, but that, you know, that's just something that we all just fall into. The more people you know, the harder it is to keep in touch with everyone. So, yeah, I guess that's always my answer to social media questions is always try to give as much as you want to receive. And I think that serves you best in the long run.
I think we have time for one more.
Can I ask
Okay.
a question?
Oh, yeah.
Did anybody not get a question? I mean, if there are people who didn't get a question, we could just go through the people who didn't get questions at least. Yeah. Wait, what? You don't have a question?
It's a very silly question. Are you familiar with and/or do you watch My Little Pony: Friendship and Magic?
I am familiar. I haven't
It is a
watched.
silly question.
I've only seen a couple episodes. I am very familiar with the Bronies online, and I admire their fandom. And I wish I knew more about it. And hopefully, but you know, true story. This is actually a really good question. True story. When I was like probably 5 or 6, I loved My Little Ponies more than anything. I had Apple Jacks, but I wanted more. And my dad was in medical school at the time when I was like 5 or 6, and we were very poor. Like you know, I did not grow up well off. We always got all of our clothes at Goodwill, and you know, we didn't have a lot of toys. And one of my mom's friends, was married to a manager at Walmart, and I was so angry at my father for wanting to be a doctor because her dad worked at Walmart, and she always got the newest My Little Ponies. And I was so angry, I told my dad one day, I want you to go work at Walmart. Stop trying to be a doctor. She had all of them. I hated her. Yeah, anybody else not ask a question? Who wants to ask a question?
You may get this one quite frequently, but I've not seen the answer. Can you talk about your first experience with tabletop gaming?
Oh, okay. I mean, I think one of my first experiences was playing Munchkin at a convention. I think that, you know, that game is like really easy for everybody to just kind of break out. Oh, and also I played Zombie Dice at Gen Con 2 years ago. I mean, that's not my first board game experience. I mean, I played a lot of board games at my grandma's house when I was a little kid. Actually, that's how we knew she had Alzheimer's, because she kept moving the life car backwards on the... It's a really sad story. Why did I say that? It's kind of true, though. She kept moving the car backwards. Oh, that's awkward. Anyway, I mean, we always played Monopoly as a kid. You know, so we played like more mainstream board games when I was a kid. And I remember I caught my mom cheating one time at the Monopoly bank, and she said it was fine. But it was not fine. It was not. It was something to cheat your child. Like, sure, you're a banker, you can do that. That is not true. Because later I tried that on somebody, and they were like, absolutely not. But yeah, I think as far as like more, less, you know, less mainstream, I think Munchkin was probably one of my first things. Besides like D&D, like I started D&D like 5, 6. I always wanted to play D&D, but my mom wouldn't let me. She cheated in Monopoly, but thought D&D was going to rot my brain. Yeah. Did you have a question?
Not me per se, but I keep trying to goad my daughter, who does our kids gaming reviews on our website, Game Gumshoes, into asking if, since you were with your parents a lot and you played games with them, if your parents ever drug you into restaurants and things to play, or let's see, we go to restaurants, we go to coffee shops, we go various places to play games, and
That's cool.
if you got drug around to do that a lot.
Oh, to go play board games places?
Yeah.
Oh, well, like I said, I am not as much of a board game player. Like, I have not been as much of a board game player in my life as video games. Like, video games were like something I did every single day, all day. I certainly was never reluctant to play video games. It was more like, get off that computer, please, and do your homework. And then I'd be like, I'm doing Math Blaster. And then she's like, okay. And then I wasn't doing Math Blaster, guys. I was not doing Math Blaster. I was lying. But she never checked, so whatever.
Can I ask you one?
Yeah.
Every once in a while, and I notice this, it seems to be pretty frequent, that games come up in traditional media and stuff like that. Do you encourage that get promoted, or are you like Dungeons and Dragons with Fargo, for example?
Oh yeah. Oh gosh, that episode, they did not know how to set the board up, and I was like, move aside. What is going on? This is not my character. Like, this is the enemy. Like, I was very specific about. They had a red box and they didn't know how to set it up, and I did all that set design. So, kudos to me. It is interesting that it's mostly like Dungeons and Dragons and Magic. Those are the two that they go to as the geek game. And like, even to me, that was the sort of the cliche I had in my mind about board games. And like, now it's opened up a whole new world for me that I've never really delved into deeply, about how fun and you can get like Cards Against Humanity that's so fun and casual and everything, and then you can get over to Agricola. How do you say it? Agricola. Sorry, yeah. And I just bought that because my brother was like, "You got to get this game," and I bought the little wooden animals too because he was like, "This is my favorite game ever." My brother's a huge hardcore board game player, so he's extremely excited about all the show. So what would you ask again?
If you're encouraged, or if it's their idea or your idea that all these games come into, or this some of that geek culture.
Oh yeah. As far as D&D, that they wanted to play D&D, they wrote that specific character. I don't have any control over that. What I think is really cool is that there seems to be like that's why we did. One of the reasons we did Tabletop was like, I got addicted to games that I didn't even know were board games. So like Ticket to Ride and Small World, I played on the iPad like a year, before Tabletop, because I was like, oh, this is a great game, and I didn't even put it together that was a board game before. And when I started delving into it, I was like, oh, this is really interesting, because I think a lot of people are finding some of these games through iOS games, and not even adding up that they could get the physical copy. But we did a really cool cross promotion with Ticket to Ride. In particular, they gave away the iPhone app for free for 3 days when the Tabletop episode came out, and a lot of people were like, "I'm addicted to this game. I'm going to go buy the board game now." So I think that's really an interesting way that this whole board game culture can be become way more mainstream, almost in a way that crossing over to even non-gamers, and I think that's really cool. It's like a door that's open, and to give new life and new fandom to the whole culture. Any other questions?
I guess the only thing left to find out is, when are you going to be on Big Bang Theory, since everybody else is?
I have no control over whether somebody hires me or not. I'm like, that would be great. Call me. That's whenever anybody asks, why are you not going to be on this?